They wore crowns, but carried a genetic curse. For centuries, royal families believed their blood was sacred. So sacred, it could never mix with commoners. Cousin married cousin, uncle married niece. And with every generation, the price grew darker. Today, we uncover the tragic lives of the most inbred women in royal history. Queens and princesses who were born to rule, but doomed by their own bloodline. Starting off at number 10, Isabella II of Spain. Born into desperation, crowned in controversy, Isabella II ascended the Spanish throne in her own right from 1833 to 1868. Though she wore the crown, history would judge her reign as a failure, ending with her being forced off the throne. Her very existence was nearly miraculous. Her father, after 3 childless marriages, married again purely to secure a male heir. But fate delivered a girl, Isabella, born in 1830. Relief followed, but unease too. Both Isabella and her sister were frail, their health worrying court physicians. The reason? Inbreeding. Her parents were uncle and niece, an avunculate marriage. That made Isabella's grandparents also her great-grandparents on another branch of the family tree. It only worsened. At just 16, Isabella was married off, against her will, to her double second cousin. She became pregnant 11 times, but only 5 children survived infancy. Yet scandal whispers that none of these children were fathered by her husband, who was likely gay.
At number 9, we meet Marie-Louise of Austria, a girl born not into a family tree, but into a family circle. Her parents weren't just related, they were double first cousins, sharing both sets of grandparents. In a dynasty where marrying your cousin was practically tradition, tragedy became a frequent visitor. Out of 12 children, only 7 survived childhood. Scientifically, her family line was so intertwined that she had only 4 unique great-grandparents, half the genetic diversity most people have. That's a level of inbreeding modern researchers usually only find in extremely isolated communities. At 18, Marie-Louise was shipped off like a diplomatic peace offering to marry Napoleon Bonaparte, the very man who once waged war against her father. It wasn't love. It was politics, power, and the desperate quest to produce an heir. On her shoulders rested the survival of empires and the weight of her family's past mistakes. Number 8, Maria I of Portugal, the queen who broke under the crown. Born in 1734, Maria came from a royal bloodline where the family tree practically folded in on itself. Her parents, King Joseph I of Portugal and Maria Anna of Spain, were already part of a long chain of intermarried Iberian royals, 16 such unions before them. And then Maria repeated the pattern. Under pressure to keep it in the family, she married her own uncle. The consequences were devastating. Nearly half of her children died young, likely due to inherited complications. As the years passed, Maria's mental health collapsed. Eventually, she was declared unfit to rule. Her downfall didn't come from war or revolution, but from the quiet, relentless damage within her own bloodline. Number 7, Lorraine Whittaker, a modern echo of an ancient problem. Lorraine Whittaker pulls us far from royal courts and straight into rural America. Lorraine Whittaker proves inbreeding isn't a tale buried in dusty history books. It's alive, silent, and still happening today. Featured in a widely discussed documentary, the Whittaker family became a haunting example of what happens when generations of isolation and intermarriage go unchallenged. Lorraine herself is considered one of the most inbred individuals documented in modern times. She is also the mother of Timmy Whittaker, often described as one of the most genetically impacted people alive today. Their story isn't shared to shock, but to remind us, history repeats itself, sometimes in grand palaces, and sometimes in forgotten corners of the world, all to secure heirs with the pure Braganza bloodline. The cost? Half of her children died from complications linked to inbreeding. The price of dynasty preservation was insanity, grief, and death. Number 6. Marie-Louise Elizabeth d'Orléans, a life written in tragedy. Marie-Louise Elizabeth d'Orléans, whose life feels like a Gothic tragedy scripted by fate itself. Her father was forced into marriage with his cousin, an illegitimate daughter of King Louis XIV. Born into this fractured legacy, Marie-Louise never really had choices, only obligations. When she was older, she too was married off to a cousin, Prince Charles of Berry. Together they had 3 children. None lived to adulthood. Grief came early and often. Historical accounts suggest she began drinking heavily, as young as 14. Was it rebellion, despair, or simply the only way she knew to manage a life she never asked for? Her story isn't just about royalty, it's about a girl trapped by bloodlines, expectations, and a destiny she didn't choose.
At number 5, we step into the twilight of old European royalty with Princess Alexia of Greece. Born in 1965, she belonged to one of the last royal families still practicing strategic marriages within their own bloodline. Her parents, Queen Anne-Marie of Denmark and King Constantine II of Greece, weren't just royals, they were biologically linked twice over. They were second cousins and third cousins. Their family tree wasn't a tree at all, it was a carefully trimmed circle, and their lineage? A web of repeated names and familiar faces. King Constantine's great-grandparents were siblings. One of his grandmothers was also the sister of his great-grandfather. Anne-Marie's lineage carried similar knots and twists. So although their marriage looked like a fairy tale, behind the crowns lay centuries of genetic repetition. Princess Alexia and her siblings became some of the last children born from traditional royal intermarriage, modern faces carrying ancient habits, much like Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip's famously intertwined bloodlines. Number 4 introduces Maria Antonia of Austria, an overlooked figure who stands, genetically speaking, at the very summit of the Habsburg dynasty's tangled legacy. While history often points to Charles II of Spain as the ultimate symbol of inbreeding, Maria Antonia's ancestry makes even his appear uncomplicated. Her family line wasn't a tree, it was a looped vine twisting back onto itself again and again. The inbreeding was so extreme that her genetic similarity mirrored that of a child born to 2 full siblings. Yet her story is rarely told. She lived in the shadow of her more infamous relatives, her name nearly erased by time. But biologically, she represents the pinnacle of a dynasty that sacrificed health for power. In third place, we venture into the sands of ancient Egypt, where 2 unnamed princesses, known only as Mummies 317A and 317B, lie as silent witnesses to a dynasty's deadly tradition. These infants, born around 1300 BCE, were the daughters, likely stillborn, of Pharaoh Tutankhamun and his wife, Ankhesenamun. But here's the chilling truth, Ankhesenamun was not just his queen, she was his half-sister. Tutankhamun himself was the product of generations of sibling and cousin marriages. By the time his daughters were conceived, his lineage was so genetically fragile that the children never stood a chance. Their tiny bodies, preserved for eternity, are a heartbreaking reminder that even god-kings could not escape the consequences of defying nature. Number 2, the Kimberley case, a modern nightmare. At number 2, we leave royal courts and step into a modern horror, the story of the Kimberley family from Australia. This isn't about crowns or thrones, it's about isolation pushed to its darkest limits. Hidden from society, this family, given a pseudonym to protect their identities, lived in a secluded rural community where generations of relatives intermarried. No royal duty, no political strategy, just secrecy, neglect, and silence. When authorities finally uncovered the truth in the 2000s, they found one of the most disturbing cases of multi-generational inbreeding ever documented. Police investigations, medical examinations, and court trials revealed the extent of abuse, genetic disorders, and suffering.
Kimberly, born into this closed loop, became one of the most genetically affected individuals in modern history. Her story is a brutal reminder that the consequences of inbreeding are not confined to ancient palaces, they're still happening behind closed doors today.
And at number 1, we meet the woman who embodied inbreeding as a tool of power, Cleopatra II Philopator. Forget Hollywood's Cleopatra VII. This is an earlier queen, one whose life was the purest and most dangerous expression of dynastic obsession. Cleopatra II was born into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a royal house that ruled Egypt but had Greek blood and guarded it fiercely. Her parents were brother and sister. Her grandparents, also siblings. Her own siblings married each other before she eventually ruled alone. She was royalty distilled to its purest form, politically powerful, genetically burdened. Even her name, borrowed from a rare Syrian noblewoman, was one of the few traces of fresh blood introduced into the family. Cleopatra II wasn't simply a queen. She was the final product of generations of carefully preserved, dangerously narrowed genetics. From modern farmhouses to glittering palaces, from sealed tombs to televised documentaries, the obsession with preserving bloodlines has shaped destinies, destroyed lives, and whispered cautionary tales across centuries. These women, princesses, queens, victims, and rulers, show us that history is not only written by wars and revolutions, but also by DNA, secrets, and the price of purity.